By the spring of 1778, General Washington and his Continental Army at Valley Forge were in much better spirits. Soldiers and supplies had arrived from France. The army was better prepared, and the bitterly cold weather was behind them. They were ready to take on the British once more. Fighting continued all across the colonies, on land and on sea, and into the wilderness west of the Mississippi River. Will this war never end? People wondered. Is it worth the loss of so many lives? The war was shifting south now, and the British, under the command of General Cornwallis, felt confident that they could defeat the colonial militia at long last. Indeed, the British won quite a few battles in the South. Little did they know that their successes were about to end. In 1781, 6 long years after the first shot of the war was fired in Lexington, Massachusetts, things began to look promising for the Continental Army. George Washington received news that 28 French ships were on their way to the coast of Yorktown, Virginia, where General Cornwallis and the Redcoats were camped. He was very excited. George Washington came up with a plan to trap the British. General Washington's troops, now camped in New York, marched all day and often through the night to Yorktown, Virginia, a town built on the banks of the York River, just a little inland from the Atlantic Ocean. While Washington moved his troops over land, French ships moved in by sea. The British couldn't escape by the land because the Continental Army was blocking them, and they couldn't escape by sea because the French ships were blocking them there. George Washington and his forces had the British blocked from both sides. British drummer boys waved the white flag to show that they were surrendering, and bands were rumored to have played the tune called "The World Turned Upside Down." The British knew they had lost the war. It must surely have seemed like an upside-down world to the British, who were used to winning wars and ruling colonies. Now they had lost a war. They would no longer rule over the American colonies. The British army was captured at Yorktown, and all the fighting in the colonies soon ended. The British sailed home, and George Washington stepped down as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. It took 2 years of meetings in Paris, France, to plan for peace. In 1783, Benjamin Franklin was there to sign the peace agreement that gave the American colonies their independence. They were finally free of British rule. They would no longer have to pay taxes to the British king. Their new nation reached from Canada in the north to Florida in the south to the Mississippi River in the west. Now the British were no longer in charge, and the colonists did not have to obey the rules of the distant, faraway king. Who would rule the new nation? Some suggested that George Washington be made the king. "King!" he scoffed. "We've been fighting to rid ourselves of a king. Our new government must be one where the people rule." But how? George Washington, exhausted by 6 years of battle, wanted only to go back to his family. He loved Mount Vernon, his home on the Potomac River in Virginia. He dreamed of being able to ride peacefully about his farm, listening to the birdsong instead of shouting out orders to his men. Washington's wife, Martha, had been a great help to him during the war, bringing food and clothing to his troops during their long, hard winters, and even camping out with them in their field tents. She, too, looked forward to spending time with her husband in the comforts of Mount Vernon. But George Washington was not able to relax on his farm for too long, as you will soon learn.